Boycotting Christmas, a fairy tale fella story. By Melinda Curtis. Copyright 2015 by Melinda Curtis. Prologue. Do you believe in fairy tales and fairy godmothers? You should. If you come to the farmer's market in Brody Falls, you'll see an old woman sitting at a card table. She dresses in red. Magical apple red. In winter, she wears a woolen red cape. In warmer months, a red scarf flutters around her silver hair like silken butterflies. Her purse is a large red satchel with a crocheted rose hanging on the side, red. Of course. Unlike other vendors, the woman in red offers no fresh produce or handmade goods. She hangs no professionally made banner and puts out no painted sandwich signs. She sits behind a simple card table with a piece of pink notebook paper taped to the edge. Her sign has two simple words on it. Love advice. Young or old, no one in Brody Falls can remember a farmer's market without her. Ignore her invitation if you like. She'll remain a mystery. Those who've sat on her folding chair won't discuss what's been said. They don't call her old. They don't call her odd. They simply call her their fairy godmother. What Nick Santolli knew about putting on a child's Christmas could fit in a shot glass. What Nick Santolli needed to know about Christmas could fill the back bar at Brody Falls Bar and Grill. What Nick Santolli needed was a miracle. With a 5-year-old niece in tow, for shopping days until Christmas, 3 hours left until his bartending shift began, 2 hours since his sister had been deployed, and one farmer's market in full swing, he shouldn't have been panicking. He was. What his sister liked to call his metrosexual man boots were rooted in the middle of the stream of shoppers looking to buy fresh produce and unique gifts at the farmer's market in Brody Falls. His niece, Cindy, sniffed and leaned against his leg. Her shoulder-length blonde curls were tousled by the brisk breeze off the San Francisco Bay. She sighed heavily and gazed up at him with big hazel eyes that spoke of hardship and disappointment. On the ride over, she proclaimed dramatically that this was going to be the worst Christmas ever, as both her parents were deployed overseas and Santa had lost her Christmas list in the mail. She didn't point out that she'd been left with an uncle who hadn't done more than attend holiday parties in years. He didn't point out that he didn't decorate or bake or sing carols. Smile, Cindy. Nothing can stop Christmas. But the smile on Nick's face felt as weak as iced tea with melted ice. Cindy heaved another sigh, not believing him.
Hello?
An old woman sitting at a card table waved. She wore a red velvet cape and a matching beret that seemed to float above her gray curls. The wind blew a piece of pink paper taped to her table up and over, so it flipped face down on the tabletop. But not before Nick read the words, love advice.
Hello?
Come see me, she sing-songed. Mrs. Claus, Cindy whispered. Trouble. Nick muttered. He'd never been to the love advice table, but he'd heard about it from women at the bar. Fairy godmother? Mrs. Claus? Swindler, more like. Mrs. Claus can give Santa my list. Cindy suddenly became a chatterbox. Mom said my list was lost in the mail. Mom said Santa might not find me. Mom said I might get my presents from the Easter Bunny. She grabbed Nick's hand and towed him through the crowd. Nick put his younger sister on the lump of coal list. Granted, Hannah was serving her country and heartsick over the possibility of her young marriage falling apart, but she shouldn't have put off buying Christmas presents for Cindy. Nick was left holding an empty Santa sack. What did he, a 29-year-old bachelor from a nightmarish, broken home, know about salvaging a child's Christmas? With those blonde curls and green eyes, Cindy looked like an angel dressed for recess in brown corduroy pants and a blue embroidered jacket. His niece climbed into the folding chair next to the love advice lady and sat on her knees. I have a message for Santa. I'm here to help. The old lady's lipstick and blush were the color of fresh poinsettias. Weren't those poisonous? Nick crossed his arms over his chest, standing guard over his niece. If this lady was running a scam, they were outta here quicker than you could say, "Here comes Santa Claus." Cindy put her palms on the table and leaned forward. "Tell him Cindy glanced up at Nick, shuing him away with one hand. "Don't listen. Step back. Don't listen." The love advice lady brushed him off as well. "But Shoo." The old woman waved him away at the same time a gust of wind pushed him back. "Christmas lists are private." Then how was he supposed to find out what Cindy wanted for Christmas? "Go," Cindy said in an imperial voice. Reluctantly, he backed up a few more feet, stress settling on his shoulders like weighted football pads. The two put their heads together. The wind blew Cindy's blonde curls against the old woman's gray loops of hair. "Have no fear," the love advice lady proclaimed in a loud voice. "Christmas will be perfect. Let your uncle sit here now." A gust of wind blew him back in their direction. Bay breezes could be as fickle as a dieting woman at a buffet. The love advice sign blew over the top of the table and settled to its regular hanging position. Cindy went to stand where Nick had been. Staring at the sign, Nick had a bad feeling in his gut, as if he'd eaten jalapeno-laden nachos and chocolate layer cake for lunch. What does Cindy want for Christmas? Santa knows. The woman waved off his question and leaned closer. "The love you seek lies in a perfect Christmas." He'd have better luck finding out what Cindy wanted by taking her to see the real fake Santa. He'd give the old lady one more chance. "There's been a misunderstanding. I just want Cindy's gift list. Not love advice." Didn't he have enough to deal with this week? The bar and grill where he worked would be packed with weary holiday shoppers and rowdy gift exchanges. He'd had to call in favors to line up babysitting for the next 2 night shifts, relying on the wives of his friends for a referral. The sitter was meeting him at the bar later. And Hannah's in-laws had yet to answer his phone calls. Hannah thought they'd gone on a cruise, but wasn't sure they'd be able to take Cindy during her unexpected deployment. Since their parents were drunks, who knew how long he'd have charge of his niece? It could be 2 weeks, it could be 6 months. Sweet little Cindy deserved more than the short end of the familial stick. She turned her back on Nick and the love advice lady, and was watching a vendor make an elf-like marionette dance. The old lady flicked a finger against his ear. "Ouch!" The spirit of Christmas knows Cindy's heart. "Find the perfect Christmas and all will be well." She tapped his chest. "You've been too empty here." Nick drew back, fighting a feeling of hollowness. "I'll give you an extra 20 to tell me what she wants." "A doll? A bike?" Was that desperation in his voice? "Cut me some." She flicked his ear again. "Ouch." His head began to pound. Thick-headed young man. "You had Christmas once. The perfect Christmas." She arched a silver brow. "Ring any bells?" "Not even a ding," he muttered. The bells in the clock tower on the town square chimed. Each bong reverberated in his aching head. "You're going to ruin Christmas for her if you don't get this right." She flicked his ear once more. He covered his ear with one hand. "So tell me what she wants. I'll buy it for her." "Look to the past." She pointed over his shoulder. Nick turned and saw her. Joy Encastle. His ghost of Christmases past. She was dressed in boots, blue jeans and a lightweight jacket. No Christmas sweater. No Christmas scarf. No Christmas packages. Didn't matter. He'd always associate her soft brown hair, softer brown eyes, and tender smile with Christmas. As a kid, she'd loved the holiday and sang carols in July. "That's right. Merry Christmas," the love advice lady sing-songed, "that'll be $40. Chapter 2. Bah, humbug. Joy Encastle tromped through the happy, jostling crowd of distracted holiday shoppers. They overflowed from Brody Falls' closed Main Street onto the sidewalk. During Christmas week, the local farmers market became a daily event and morphed into something of a craft fair, a chance for gift hunters to find one-of-a-kind gifts. Someone cut through the crowd and sideswiped Joy with a big shopping bag, nearly sending her crashing into an old-fashioned street lamp. "Merry Christmas to you, too," she grouched. 4 more days and the year's spectacle would be over. The obligatory gifts that didn't come from the heart. The commercial displays of Christmas. The need to put on a perfect front of holiday cheer, inside and out. Such a marketing scam. She couldn't pick up her dry cleaning without subjecting herself to holly, Santa sweaters, and choruses of jingle bells. Man, how she missed it. After years of putting up themed decorations, wrapping presents like a designer, and making special meals served on Mom's china, Joy was boycotting Christmas. Not because she thought the holiday no longer had meaning, but because she was trying to save her widowed father from himself. 4 more days. She hoped she could make it. After this last errand, Joy was holing up in her apartment and binge-watching The Blacklist on Netflix, or something equally dark. Anything on regular television would be holiday-themed. She wouldn't succumb to one chorus of "Deck the Halls," no matter how tempting it was. "Joy?" Nick Santolli called to her from across the shopper-filled street. "Oh. My. Goldfish." The last time Nick had called out to Joy was her 16th birthday, right after she'd gotten her braces off, and right before she'd trapped him in the hallway and offered him the opportunity to see how straight and smooth her teeth were. With his tongue. She'd clung to his leather jacket, professed her undying love, and the desire to have his babies. Nick had refused her kiss, her love, her womb. She might have eventually recovered from that embarrassing moment if not for the look of horror on his face. Mortified, she hadn't acknowledged him since. Well. Joy didn't count the night she'd bumped into him during a pub crawl to celebrate her 21st birthday. She preferred to pretend she was too drunk to remember. Not that they hadn't seen each other at least once a year during the past decade. As her older brother Kyle's best friend, Nick was always invited to the Encastle gathering on Christmas Day. But Joy had perfected the art of avoiding him. Joy. Nick dodged his way through the crowd, looking unavoidably hot, hunky, and... Was that a child with him? When did you get married? Joy blurted before her Nick-mushed brain remembered that he had a niece. Nick and the blonde cutie came to an abrupt halt in front of her, as if he'd been planning to hug Joy, but was stopped by her greeting. "I'm not," he said with all the gusto of a confirmed bachelor, bookended by uncomfortable chuckles. "This is my niece. Cindy." And then he grinned. Grinning Nick was still single. The sun sparkled on the earth. The angels chorused. Hold up. Joy shouldn't be feeling schoolgirl giddiness. And yet, she was thankful for a rare good hair day and the fact that she'd been boycotting the holiday for weeks now, which included not eating the baked goods and candy her coworkers insisted on bringing into the department. She could care less that Nick's hair was black and thick and perfect or that his grin still had a direct line to the swoon switch in her belly. Maybe she could ask him to smile a little less. Maybe he'd remember their past awkwardness and stop smiling. No such luck. If anything, his smile broadened. "We're on a mission and need some help." He hadn't asked for her help in 10 years, probably because he was afraid she'd offer up her womb again. 2 teenage girls strutted by wearing reindeer antlers sprouting from glittery red headbands. Mrs. Forsyth, one of her dad's neighbors, stopped to talk to someone on the corner. The red bulb on her Christmas sweater blinked on and off. "So cute." Nope. Nope, nope, nope. Joy didn't miss Christmas. Not one bit. Keep telling yourself that, girl. Can you help us? Cindy had a porcelain doll-like beauty and every iota of Santolli charm. She smiled and blinked up at Joy with all the innocence of a newborn. "I have a list." "A list?" A trio of boys dodged through the crowd waving a sheet of paper. 2 more, one of them yelled. "A list." Of course. Joy was definitely slow on the uptake today. Oh, you're doing the annual holiday scavenger hunt for charity. Let me see what you're looking for. She held out her hand. Working in customer service at Macy's, Joy made it her business to know where customers could find various gifts around town. After all, Miracle on 34th Street was one of her favorite holiday movies. No, Nick glanced down at Cindy, who studied Joy judiciously now, as if she expected to be disappointed. My sister was deployed today and I've never put on a holiday by myself. His grin turned bad boy apologetic. They both knew he'd never put up a tree in his life. The closest his bachelor pad had probably come to Christmas decor was mistletoe over the bedroom door. Subtlety wasn't Nick's style. We need help. From you. Most likely because she worked at a department store and got a decent discount. I'm on vacation this week, but I can. You're free. Perfect. This is perfect. He did hug her then. A big, brotherly bear hug complete with a spin that cleared a path in the crowd and sent her heart racing, her inner 16-year-old self squealing, and striking her adult self dumb. When he set her down, Joy was lightheaded. She had to hold onto those sturdy shoulders to prevent herself from falling. We'll need the works. A storybook Christmas. Joy Encastle style. Wait. She disengaged and took a step back. What? We want a perfect Christmas. He high-fived his niece. I mean, how often does an uncle get the chance to put on the holiday? Nick swung Cindy into the air next, scattering shoppers once more. We're going all out. The works. Spare no expense for my favorite niece. Cindy giggled. She was his only niece. There's just one problem with your plan. Joy tried not to look into the little girl's delighted eyes. I'm boycotting Christmas. Nick's grin faded. That's like saying the elves went on strike. Or Rudolph's nose went out. Or. I get where you're going. Don't look at the girl. Don't look at the girl. But don't ask me. Not this year. She looked at the girl. The little thing drooped like a flower in a heat wave. But why? Nick pulled her a few feet away from Cindy. You love Christmas. You bake and fill tons of cookie tins. You spend days decorating, inside and out. You. Times change. Joy swallowed and looked away, preparing to recite the lie she'd been telling since Thanksgiving. You learn the true meaning of Christmas and. A flash of pink caught Joy's eye. Shades of sugar daddies. Why did she have to bump into her pinkness now? Joy stepped closer to Nick, trying to become invisible behind his broad shoulders. Don't let them see me. Who? Nick began to turn around. Joy grabbed his shoulders and whispered, Don't look. They'll see. Cindy turned, looking about. Is it Santa and his reindeer? No, sweetie, Joy whispered. Much worse. It was the reason for her holiday boycott. Nick brought his head down next to Joy's, bringing his lips to her ear. Who would have thought Joy Encastle would be on the run from the law? Her fingers dug deeper into his shoulders, and her heart did a most unwanted Christmas jig around her chest. I'm not one of America's most wanted. Just, shush. So bossy. He chuckled. She felt his mirth travel down her arms and tickle its way to her toes. The next time she saw Kyle, she was going to slug him for ever being friends with Nick. At least, Nick didn't know who she was hiding from. At least, they hadn't seen her. Joy? Is that you? Dad's voice cut through the holiday crowd tentatively. It had been weeks since they'd spoken. Nick stopped laughing. Dark brown eyes flashed Joy a questioning look, one that didn't stop him from smiling warmly as he turned. Hey, Mr. Encastle. Merry Christmas. Joy experienced a moment of shoulder-slumping defeat before she put on her big girl panties, the ones with the industrial strength control panel. She stepped out of his shadow. "Hey, Dad." She hadn't seen him since they'd argued at Thanksgiving. For the first time in what seemed like forever, Dad's graying hair was stylishly cut, his chinos pressed. His smile was hopeful. "You're shopping? Does this mean?" "No," she said, feeling chilled. Her gaze shifted to her pinkness, who was decked in hot pink, even her skinny jeans. And held Joy's father's arm as if she'd been given the last candy cane in Santa's bag and there was still a line for candy behind her. While Jack greeted Nick, her pinkness turned to Joy. "Well, if it isn't our daughter." "Don't call me that, Penny," Joy whispered, forcing herself to smile at her former best friend, who was 26. The same age as Joy. And 40 years younger than the man she was engaged to, Joy's dad. Ick and...
Ew.
"Are those Barbie clothes?" Cindy asked, reaching a finger out to touch the glittery pink jacket vest Penny wore. "They're so pink and small." "Yep, too small." Panty line revealing small, just the way Penny liked them lately. What had happened to the more down-to-earth Penny? The one who only occasionally wore pink and wouldn't date anyone over the age of 30? Okay, maybe Penny had never been down-to-earth, but she had never looked at wrinkles or beer bellies and said, "Oh, baby, I gotta get me some of that." Pink is a power color, sweet thing. You'll learn all about how to use it when you get older. Penny turned her back on the little girl and shored up her fakest smile for Joy. "When are you going to stop this nonsense?" We miss you." For a nanosecond, there was regret in Penny's gaze. They'd been friends since they were toddlers and frenemies since last spring. "Why don't you come over tonight for dinner?" Her false eyelashes strobe lighted at Joy's father. "Don't let her say no, honey poo." "Honey poo?" Joy threw up in her throat. Mom had to be spinning in her grave. Dad beamed, thrusting out his chest. He-Man with his soon-to-be trophy wife. Joy was teleported out of her body. To hell. Her former BFF and her dad? It was karma, going around and coming around. She never should have pushed Patty Plaxica down in 3rd grade. Or stolen Mason Watson's pencil in 5th. Or... Sorry, Penny. Nick took Cindy and Joy by their hands. "We have plans tonight." He led them down the sidewalk. And he was such a big, tall body that shoppers actually moved to avoid him. Joy's legs felt as if they'd been filled with straw. She clung to Nick. That was fantastic. Did you see the look on Penny's face? She'd crumpled like an overbaked cookie. That's what this boycott is about? Your best friend is sleeping with your dad? The straw in Joy's legs solidified. She planted her heels and dragged Nick to a stop in front of Santa's bouncy house. It was filled with shrieking children. She dug $1 out of her purse and gave it to Cindy. "Go bounce, sweetie. I have to talk to your uncle about the true meaning of Christmas and Barbie." Cindy stared at the dollar for a moment. "I don't want Santa to bring me Barbie. I want G.I. Joe." Joy nodded sagely. Wise girl. You could bet G.I. Joe wouldn't let his best friend date his mom. Cindy skipped off. Joy tugged Nick over to a bench in front of the local Grinder coffee house. "Penny's not sleeping with Dad." Unfortunately, Joy didn't sound convincing, and Nick knew it. He leaned back against the bench and quirked an eyebrow. Joy could remember being struck speechless by that look as a girl. Now? Well, it hardly made her tremble. This is just a phase Penny's going through. Like the phase Joy had gone through being in love with Nick. Okay, maybe decades of lusting after a man couldn't be called a phase, but Joy's choices in men weren't being called into question here. Nick's eyebrow went up higher. Penny lost her job last spring and couldn't find another one. Her parents refused to help her out with rent, so she went radical. She visited the love advice lady in the hopes of finding true love and Prince Charming. Joy glanced across the street to where she'd first seen Nick in front of the love advice table. And oh, unhappy coincidence. That was about the time I gave Penny my blessing to ask Dad for a loan, because everyone's family at Encastle's. Nick watched Cindy climb into the bouncy house. Best thing about the Encastle Christmas party is your dad's speech. Makes me love him all the more. Not enough to marry him, I bet, Joy mumbled. How had it come to this? Little did I know, Penny would turn down a loan and go for Dad's entire bank account. The change in her friend was almost night and day. I heard something from Kyle about your dad dating someone, but he never said who. Nick was trying really hard not to smile. His mouth was contorting as if he'd gotten caramel stuck in his teeth. How does this figure into a holiday boycott? Call it desperation. Since she's been dating Dad, Penny has transitioned to all things pink. All clothes tight and revealing. And on Thanksgiving, she showed up with bags full of pink holiday decorations and… oh, wow. She stepped on your traditional Christmas toes. Nick sobered. I mean, your dad and Kyle love Christmas, but since your mom died, you call the decoration shots. Nick knew how important the holiday was to her. Mom had lost her long battle with cancer the day after Christmas when Joy was 10. Putting up her mother's decorations was like having her celebrate with them, just as she had that last holiday season they'd had together. Why hadn't Penny understood? Joy scuffed the sole of her boot on the pavement. In the bounce house, Cindy was being flung into the air by the bigger kids' jumps. She couldn't have looked happier. So. Nick smiled. It was a full-on, why can't you see the humor in this smile, the one he'd used to cheer her up when she was a girl. Penny's making over your dad's place to look like Barbie's holiday playhouse and you decide to boycott Christmas? You really think I'm that shallow? Joy refused to be cajoled. It gets worse. While we were discussing her rights to decorate, this was the part that turned Joy's stomach. Penny announced their engagement. Joy had nearly fainted. Dad was so happy. Christmas is how we honor Mom. It's like he wants to erase her from our past. That's the part that stung. Dad couldn't see what a fool he was being, how he was being played for his financial stability. He wouldn't listen to reason. So that's when Kyle and I took a stand. No Christmas, not on our own or with Dad. Not if he insists upon marrying her. So no tree. No lights. No caroling. No cards. No baking. Her lungs felt deflated. She gasped her way through the rest. No parties. No eggnog. No secret Santa. No adopting a needy family. No turkey. No stuffing. No Christmas. Across the street, a Salvation Army volunteer rang the bell for donations and sang, "O Come All Ye Faithful." One of her favorites. It made Joy miss Christmas, and Dad even more. Why are you getting your Santa suit all in a bunch? Nick was no longer smiling. Your dad isn't going to marry Penny just because he's sleeping with her. They aren't sleeping together. Joy clung to that fact like a Titanic survivor clung to a lifeboat. The quirking eyebrow. The steady stare. His niece wasn't getting anything past him this Christmas, and neither was she. Penny still has her apartment, Joy said weakly. His scrutiny didn't let up. He should have been an interrogator at Quantico. Joy defended the belief that was keeping her sane. Penny told me nothing hinky is going on, okay? She said they're waiting until the wedding. She shuddered. I feel so dirty. Talking about my dad's sex life. She shored up her determination and her voice. But if this boycott doesn't make my dad come to his senses, he'll be married in 10 days. Nick did a double take. They set a date? Yes. Why do you think Kyle and I are taking a stand? They've booked a wedding chapel on New Year's Eve. According to Penny, I'm the maid of honor. She's so nutty, she ordered me a dress. A horrifyingly hot pink, atrociously ruffled chiffon dress. She looked like a pink body wash puff in it. There are 10 days until the wedding. 10 days for Dad to realize this is the biggest mistake of his life. We used to be the poster family for the holiday. It bound us together. But it's tearing us apart. This is our family's worst Christmas ever. I'm sorry. I didn't understand the stakes, Joy. Nick leaned forward and took her hand. His was much larger than hers. Much warmer than hers. Tell you what. I'll make you a deal. I'll support your boycott by being a no-show at your dad's annual holiday party, if you help me make Christmas the Encastle way for Cindy. Joy frowned. Isn't that cheating? Not if it isn't at your place. Not your tree. Not your decorations. Not your Christmas. I won't even invite you over for Christmas dinner. His dark eyes sparkled with mischief. Although you might have to help me cook it. Chocolate had never been as tempting as his offer. But she hesitated. Penny's laughter drifted to Joy from down the street. Back when they were friends, the sound used to be infectious. They'd grown up 3 houses away from each other. Shared secrets and giggled over boys. Had sleepovers and written in each other's diaries. Argued over Team Jacob, Joy, versus Team Edward, Penny. If there was any chance Penny really loved her father, any chance Penny was Dad's soulmate, Joy wouldn't be boycotting Christmas. She'd get over the age difference and the ick factor and even the flood of pink. Nick leaned closer, lowering his voice as he spoke until it was a warm rumble of air across her cheek. This doesn't have to be the worst Christmas ever. It can be perfect. Joy's heart beat faster. Chapter 3. I can't. Joy slipped her hand from his. Nick stared at his empty palm. What was happening here? A moment ago, Joy had been putty in Nick's hands. He could tell by the worried crinkle in her forehead and the way she stiffened at Penny's laughter. He knew he was going to get his way. Give me one good reason why not. The annoyance in his voice cut through the air and cut open the seal on the door to Christmas past. Of Christmas mornings without stockings or presents or laughter. Of his father, singing bawdy, made-up versions of Jingle Bells. Of his mother, passed out on the floor. To this day, Nick couldn't stomach drinking. And yet, he made a good living bartending. And he thought Joy was crazy for boycotting a holiday? Nick hadn't been much of a Christmas fan as a kid. It wasn't until Mr. Encastle had told his superior at Child Protective Services that he was taking Nick and Hannah to his home for the holiday that Nick learned what it was all about. Major bling, sure. But also camaraderie, family, and love. Lots and lots of love. It shone in every strand of tinsel, every curl of ribbon, every softly baked cookie. And Joy was abstaining. Joy clasped her hands in her lap. She hadn't shrunk back at his outburst. She didn't pout at his anger. She was classy, through and through. She hadn't come from the wrong side of the tracks. She hadn't grown up with parents who traded food stamps for alcohol and cigarettes. She was out of his league. And what reason would I give for helping you, she said quietly. What excuse would Dad and Penny accept? I won't pretend that we're a couple. Her cheeks turned as red as her t-shirt beneath her navy pea coat. Was he that abhorrent to her? She couldn't bring herself to kiss him when she was sober? But why would she? Joy had outgrown her interest in him long ago, with a little help from her older brother, Kyle, who'd witnessed Joy begging for a kiss on her 16th birthday and had pantomimed a painful death, Nick's, if he accepted any of Joy's offers. The women who chased him now were like tuna fishermen, ready to bag a big fish, take him home, and mount him on the wall. He hadn't dated in a while because he felt like a sex object, the good-looking bachelor bartender. The shoe was truly on the other foot. Nick's gaze dropped to Joy's lips. She had a small, delicate mouth. He'd always liked her array of smiles, from small and private when she found a situation amusing, to a grin as joyful as her name. She'd lip-balmed him during her 21st birthday pub crawl and he hadn't been disappointed. In fact, he'd stopped by the Encastles a few days later to see if she might be interested in getting together. She and Penny had been laughing about Joy having her memory wiped by alcohol. Joy claimed she didn't remember much of that night. Whether that was true or not, Mr. Encastle had taken Nick aside and told him he was family in a way that said, "Don't stop being like a brother to Joy." He couldn't date Joy without risking losing his status with the Encastles. But now. Those lips. He leaned closer. "What are you doing?" Joy pushed him back. Wondering. He lifted his gaze to hers. Wondering what? If she had been any other woman, he'd have lied and made a joke. But this was Joy. He'd known her since she believed in Santa and true love. It was suddenly important that he know if she remembered lip-bombing him. "I was wondering what kissing you would be like." She clutched the bench seat, white-knuckling it as if he drove them in a fast car, and she held onto the dash. Because she didn't lean in, because she didn't glance at his mouth, because she'd been treating him like an acquaintance for the past 10 years rather than a friend, he took that for a rejection. His heart felt like it had shrunk 2 sizes too small. He'd blown this. Him and his smooth lines. Cindy's Christmas was ruined. "I'm sorry, I should have known Christmas isn't for people like me." Guys who'd grown up in low-income, abusive households, and then foster care. Guys who'd been warned by her dad and brother not to touch her. Guys like me don't deserve perfect Christmases. But don't worry about it. We'll muddle through. Joy's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish's. Once. Twice. And then she surprised him by saying, "I'll do it. We'll start tomorrow. Chinese takeout. Open up." Kyle banged on Joy's apartment door until she opened it. Her brother hesitated in the doorway, glancing around. "I keep expecting you to cave in to the holiday. If you don't succumb, I can't either." With his hands still full, he shook a lock of shaggy brown hair out of his eyes. "I just turned down a Girl Scout selling candy canes. I felt like Scrooge. I didn't think boycotting Christmas would be this hard. Tell me about it." Joy relieved him of the Chinese food and set it on the coffee table. "Nick asked me to help him put on Christmas for his niece. She's adorable. You can't help him. That's cheating." Kyle hung his black jacket on a hook by the door. "I'm not celebrating." "They are. I'm more of a holiday consultant." She'd been unable to resist the hurt in Nick's dark eyes when he admitted he didn't think he deserved a special holiday. Besides, he sounded desperate. And he'd said he wanted to kiss her. "Okay, I'll allow it for the kids' sake, but don't bend the rules anymore." Kyle sat on her antique Victorian sofa with rosebud red velvet cushions. As usual, he bumped his shoulders against the carved wood trim. "I swear, this year I'm buying you a real sofa for Christmas. One that fits human beings from this century." He shifted, trying to get comfortable. "That's the great thing about boycotting Christmas. You don't have to buy me a gift." But Joy had bought him one months ago, before the wedding announcement and their decision to ignore the holiday. She was keeping it for his birthday in June. Kyle opened his takeout container, and opened the spigot on his older brother tone. "Watch yourself with Nick. Like you watch yourself with Penny." And if that wasn't the biggest irony. Kyle had once had a thing for Penny, but he'd told Joy he'd rather not pursue a relationship and risk Joy's friendship with her. Joy turned on the game and muted it. Every year during December, their family chose teams playing Monday Night Football and had to donate the amount of that team's final score to a holiday charity. She muted the pre-game show. She was setting aside what would have been her holiday donations each week to give to the Salvation Army in January. "I miss watching Monday Night Football with Dad. I miss him coming over for Chinese. We've been ignoring one another for weeks. What if he never realizes Penny loves his money more than him? What if he marries Penny? What if I have to wear that dress?" They both looked at the sea of pink ruffles hanging over the window where Joy's tree usually stood. Joy turned pleading eyes to her brother. Can't you just sweep her off her feet? Out from under Dad's? Kyle stirred his chow mein. I can't afford her. And if that's what she's looking for in a relationship, I don't want her. There was no heartbreak in his tone. She's changed, Joy. She's not just a bridezilla, she's a moneyzilla. There was another knock on the door. Kyle and Joy exchanged glances that soon became smiles. It was Monday Night Football, after all. And tradition to have it at Joy's place. Dad! They both shouted, bumping into each other like they'd done on many a Christmas morning in a rush to get to their presents, each trying to get to the door first. Penny? Kyle dropped back a step, having gotten to the door first. Your pinkness, Joy said gloomily. I thought I'd find you two here, despite what Nick said earlier at the farmer's market. Penny slunk in, inspecting the apartment with a scowl like the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. All she needed was a black cape and a large butterfly net. Still boycotting, I see. We need to talk. We're eating, Joy began at the same time Kyle said, the game. I hate to see the family torn up over a lack of compromise. Hands on hips, Penny stood in front of the television. I came to offer a truce. Pink Penny didn't do compromises. Joy and Kyle exchanged glances, crossed their arms over their chests, and glared at her. Their animosity had no effect on Penny. She may not have had a strong work ethic, but that didn't mean she wasn't strong. She smiled serenely. What would it take to bring peace to the Encastle family? If you're looking to be bought out, Joy said, feeling sick to her stomach. We don't have much, but I don't want your money. I want us to be like before. Penny glanced over her shoulder at the kickoff team taking the field. Monday night Chinese food. Thursday night bowling. Saturday night caroling. Shopping trips to Union Square. She faced Joy. Smiling without tension or superiority, smiling the way her best friend used to. Why does my marriage have to change that? It was harder for Joy to tell this Penny the truth than it should have been given the war zone they'd been in the past few months. Maybe because you don't love my dad, she said softly. I love him. But Penny stared at her pink boots, sounding little girl lost. Same as I love you guys. The urge to comfort her was strong. Joy hadn't realized she'd taken a step forward until Kyle put a hand on her arm. You love him like a father. Kyle's words were as hard as the rock candy Grandma Encastle used to make. That had been pink, too. Come on, Penny. Joy made her plea as gentle as she would to a kitten stuck on a high tree branch, an innocent thing who'd climbed too high and didn't know how to come down. You're not hot for Dad. Marriage needs to have passion and heat in. Henry is very sexy, Penny said stubbornly, making both siblings squirm. But you haven't slept with him. Maybe there's a reason for that, Joy whispered. Penny's cheeks flamed as pink as her boots. I don't have to take this from you. She marched to the door, pushing Kyle out of the way. You're supposed to be my friend, Joy. And you're going to be my daughter. And you, KK Kyle. Penny looked infuriated over her stutter. You're going to be my son. She flung open the door and made her exit. Joy rushed into the doorway. This isn't like when we used to play house, Penny. If you don't back out, you'll be Mrs. Henry Encastle 24/7. Joy was proud of her calm tone and the soft click as she closed the door. She was shaking, knees ready to buckle. Kyle plopped onto her couch, banging his shoulders on the wood again. If I ever have a midlife crisis, you'll intervene, right? You won't let it come to this. She sank next to him. I've got your back. Good. He poked at his chow mein. Now, what color sofa do you want for your birthday? Today had been a near perfect day for Nick. A perfect Christmas was as good as in Santa's bag. With Joy in charge, how could it be any less than spectacular? But things weren't going as smooth as Nick liked. He glanced at his phone, checking the time. The babysitter was supposed to meet him at the bar and grill at 6. He planned to drive Cindy and the sitter to his house during his dinner break and get them settled. The sitter was late. And the women at table 10 didn't realize they'd need a taxi. Their third round of margarita glasses were empty, but their voices were full of alcohol-fueled enthusiasm. He told their waitress not to serve them any more alcohol, and then restocked the back bar with a fresh bottle of tequila. "Shirley Temple, please." Nick turned to face his latest customer, ready to offer a holiday greeting. "Only you?" "Me," the love advice lady nodded her head. "Same gray curls as this morning. Same red beret." She carried the red velvet cape over her arm, revealing a simple red dress with orthopedic black pumps. "Shirley Temple, please." She climbed onto a bar stool. "I've never seen you here before." Nick may have been the head bartender at the bar and grill, but he was also training to be the manager, which meant he put in extra time while he trained. "Are you stalking me? Or has business been slow? We don't allow soliciting in here." She cooed. "You've been working on this." She patted a spot on her dress above her heart. "Now, just don't let the past get in your way. And hurry up with that, Shirley Temple. I don't have all night. I'm meeting someone here." "Blind date?" Nick made short work of her order. It was the same drink Cindy had. She colored in a small booth near the window. "That'll be $3. The old lady's smile was as wide as the Cheshire Cat's. She hopped off the bar stool with more energy than someone half her age. "Take it out of what you owe me." "Shoot. I should have asked for it to go." She plucked the cherry from the top and ate it. "I paid you earlier." That nacho chocolate feeling was taking over his gut again. "No, my dear. I'm the babysitter Margot referred to you." She held out her arms and struck a model-like pose. "Not what you were expecting?" Nick's mouth went dry. "I'll need some identification." Like magic, she snapped a business card on the bar. And then she waved Cindy over. "Shouldn't we be going? Isn't this your dinner break?" "Mrs. Claus." Cindy slipped her hand in the old lady's. "Are you my sitter? Do you play games? What's for dinner?" "Macaroni and cheese and chocolate." "Hey, this was a mistake." Nick needed to regroup. He could put Cindy in the break room with the television and more responsible adults than the old biddy in front of him. The old biddy laughed. It sounded like holiday bells. "I'm kidding, Nicholas." She bent to Cindy's level. She was so short, she barely had to bend at all. "Your uncle only has soup, bread, and frozen pizza at home. We're going to have soup and toast for dinner." Nick tried to snag Mike O'Hara's attention away from the pool table. He could use Officer Mike's services about now for a background check. "How did you know what food I have at home?" He'd overslept this morning and hadn't had time to get to the store before meeting Hannah and Cindy. "Simple." The love advice lady winked. "You're a bachelor." Mike finally looked Nick's way. He took a couple steps forward, caught sight of the love advice lady, grinned, and called out, "You'll be fine," before returning to his game. Did that mean the love advice lady had a hand in Mike's recent engagement? "Now," the old woman said, tapping her finger on the counter. "Quit dawdling. Grab your coat and get your keys. Cindy and I have a busy night ahead of us." She led Cindy toward the door, leaving Nick no choice but to follow. It wasn't until he returned to the bar that he found the card she'd left behind. All it said was, "Love advice." No name. No phone. No email. Not even a Facebook account. Chapter 4. Joy knocked on Nick's door the next morning with a knee-knocking dose of trepidation. Yesterday, Nick had nearly kissed her. Okay, nearly was probably an overstatement. As a kid, Nick had been the wild thing. While the rest of the guys dared each other to jump from the Encastle roof into the pool, Nick had already climbed to the roof and leapt off. While the guys were smack talking about whose car was faster, Nick would be winning a drag race. And women? Nick had been charming their pants off since he was 16. Joy locked her knees. She wasn't going to be just another woman who fell at Nick's feet. She was here to scope out his bungalow, and then take him and Cindy shopping for Christmas decorations. She knocked again. Harder. Footsteps pounded toward the door to the musical sound of Cindy's giggles. "Wait," Nick said. Cindy flung the door open, standing there in a blue princess dress and a pink lipstick job that looked like she was applying to Ringling Brothers' clown division. "Joy is here for Christmas." She giggled and pointed behind her. "Look!" Nick stood behind Cindy in gray boxers, a black wife beater, and a pink tutu. The sequins in the tulle caught the light as he bravely came forward. Joy lifted her gaze to his face. The same shade of pink lipstick graced his lips. His cheeks were highlighted with apple red blush. His dark eyes accented with glittery, teal eyeshadow. "Don't say a word." Nick pointed at Joy with a star-topped, silver wand. "You're early." Joy didn't know where to look: sculpted arms, strong thighs, buns of steel, or how to react: poker face, tolerant smile, hysterical laughter. "He's the sugar plum fairy." Cindy twirled. "He dances and grants wishes." The 6'5" sugar plum fairy stomped down the hall. Joy found her voice. "The white sports socks are a nice touch. I picked those out." Cindy twirled again. "You're a fashionista for sure." Joy came inside and closed the door behind her, wishing she was faster with her cell phone. A picture was worth 1,000 free drinks at Nick's bar. "Uncle Nick says you're helping us pick out a tree and lights and ornaments." Busy day today. Lots of catching up to do. She'd never been inside Nick's house. With him in his diva dressing room, she had time to look around. The small living room opened up to the kitchen and small dining area. The wall facing the backyard was floor-to-ceiling plate glass windows, revealing a narrow strip of lawn, a couple lawn chairs, and a grill. Furniture was sparse: a simple black leather couch and matching recliner broken up by a glass-topped set of end tables. The couch faced the fire and the large screen television mounted above it. There was plenty of room for a tree if things were moved around. Joy returned her attention to Cindy. "Are you committed to wearing that dress? We're going to a Christmas tree farm. Dirt, bugs, live trees, dirt." Cindy gasped. "I'm changing. Mrs. Claus says the tree is the bestest part of Christmas." Her feet pounded across the dark wood floors. "Wash your face first," Joy called. "That dress is too pretty for lipstick stains." Cindy did one better. She ran back to the living room and handed Joy a wet, black washcloth. The bad boy clichés just kept coming. Joy bet Nick had black satin sheets too. Face clean, Cindy skipped to the back of the house. Joy set her purse on the coffee table and began shifting the furniture around, creating space for a tree in front of the window facing the backyard. A few minutes later, Nick appeared with a freshly scrubbed face and considerably more clothes on. Jeans, a black t-shirt that hugged his chest, and a pair of steel-in black half-boots. "Don't say a word about the tutu." Joy grinned. "That was, no." He backhanded the air where her dig would have landed between them. "You were, hey." His palms made the international stop sign. Joy drew out the word, but he didn't cut her off this time. "Adorable." Joy had to fight back a smile, because there was a speck of glitter at the corner of Nick's eye and the skin around his upper lip was a tad pink. He was adorable, too. "I see you did some early shopping." She pointed to the tea set and pint-sized, plastic table and chairs. He smiled, looking so proud of himself. "She saw it at the farmer's market. I couldn't resist." "From now on, resist," Joy said firmly. This isn't the 12 days of Christmas. You want Christmas morning and those gifts she opens to be special. He nodded, pride draining from his features, until he looked disappointed in himself. Poor thing. Have you eaten? She glanced at the tea table and the plate of store-bought sweets. Other than tea? You're allowed to gorge on sugar at Christmas. He sheepishly took the plate and dumped its contents into a plastic zippered bag. But I doubt Cindy's hungry. We'll have an early lunch. Joy added holiday cookie tins to her mental shopping list. Cindy, let's go, sweetie. Nick stood in the middle of his living room, the beginnings of a frown on his face. Why did you move my furniture? I made room for a tree. Joy moved to the plate glass window and outlined an imaginary tree in the space. There was room by the fireplace. He stared at his couch, now an unromantic distance from the hearth. Fire hazard. Joy outlined the tree again. Imagine the soft lights of the tree reflected in the glass at night. It's more romantic than a fire. He looked doubtful. Ho ho ho. Nick unbuckled Cindy from her car seat, feeling as if Christmas had finally begun. He remembered coming here once with the Encastles, running through rows of Douglas fir trees, riding on a hay wagon, drinking hot apple cider, feeling like this was how Christmas ought to begin. Let's go for a sleigh ride. Oh, no. Joy came to stand next to him. The sleigh ride is a reward for finding the perfect tree. That'll be easy. We want the biggest tree. He swung Cindy into the air. With her parents contemplating divorce, he'd love to give her a larger-than-life Christmas. Oh, no. Joy waved her arms. Your ceiling is too low for anything over 6 feet. But, I'm over 6 feet. I don't want to be taller than the tree. A sign caught his eye. Look! There's a row of 8-footers. He tucked Cindy beneath his arms like a football and ran to the row. Stop. Nick ground to a halt as if he was playing freeze tag. What? What am I doing wrong? He was beginning to feel as if he was earning a timeout and he wasn't even sure what for. Joy leaned her head to the right and bent her torso in the same direction. Quick. What am I? A teapot? Nick guessed. Oh, I know. I know. Cindy waved her hand in the air. The letter C? Nope. I'm Uncle Nick's 8-foot-tall tree in a 1-foot-tall tree stand scrunched up against his 8-foot-tall ceiling. She caught Nick's eye and gave a brief head nod like Mrs. Lipswitch used to do after reading off spelling words in the 3rd grade. We'll start with the 6-footers. But we may have to go down to 5 to find the perfect tree this late in the year. Way to cut a man down to size, Nick mumbled, stopping to check out an axe at the lot's makeshift office. The perfect Christmas tree is not about size, Joy deadpanned. Christmas spirits partially restored at her humor, Nick chose the biggest axe they had. Size matters to a lot of people. Women named Bunny, perhaps? Joy tried to look innocent, but couldn't quite pull it off. He'd brought Bunny to the Encastle Christmas 2 years ago. Bunny and her curves were kind of hard to forget. What kind of tree did she have? Bunny didn't have time for a tree. And by the way, she graduated from Berkeley and is now a rocket scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. Joy was picking on one of Nick's more memorable Christmas dates? 2 could play at that game. What about Norman? The nerdy insurance salesman Joy brought to her family's holiday party last year. What kind of tree did he pick out? How about this one? Cindy tugged on a tree branch. Mrs. Claus would like it. It's too scraggly, Nick said. Keep looking. We want the right tree for Mrs. C. At Joy's inquisitive look, Nick explained. She's our sitter. God help them. He'd had a lecture again last night about empty hearts and wounds of the past. About Norman. Sadly, Norman had a plastic tree with lights and tinsel already on it. Joy sounded miffed. That's how I knew it wouldn't last. He did have the best tacky Christmas sweater. A toy soldier with yarn fringe trim. He bought that without realizing it was tacky, Joy said. That should be my prerequisite for dating, must do Christmas right. Which took Nick out of the running. Hard to hold to that standard when you're boycotting Christmas. Although, you're not really boycotting. You're here with us. I'm a consultant. I won't be spending Christmas with you. And wasn't that a shame? Cindy jumped up and down in front of a tree. How about this one? Joy looked at it with a critical eye, much like she'd looked at Nick yesterday when he stated his need for help. Finally, she shook her head. It's got too many empty spaces. We can do better. Cindy skipped ahead. Joy refused tree after tree. Cindy's feet started to drag. Nick was ready to call it quits and pick out the next tree they came upon. No tree was worth this much trouble. Wait a minute. Joy ran her hands from top to bottom, outlining the symmetry of the tree. You two stand next to this one. She dug her phone out of her pocket and snapped their picture. Let me see. Let me see. Cindy hopped to her side and stared at the phone's display. It's beautiful. Joy's expression softened. She stroked Cindy's blonde curls. You two are beautiful. And then she looked up at Nick. He'd been called a lot of things, but never beautiful. And he'd been smiled at by a lot of women, but never had a smile touched him like Joy's did. That smile said, I don't care who your parents were. That smile said, I don't care if you've dated women named Bunny. That smile said, I like you just the way you are. The tree was totally worth the time it took to find it. You know what this means? Joy asked. Cindy threw up her hands as if she was announcing a touchdown. Sleigh ride. The wagon that served as a sleigh was in need of padding and a good pair of shocks. Not that Cindy cared. She sang the chorus of Jingle Bells repeatedly. Other kids joined along. Joy had refused a sleigh ride, stating it would be in violation of her boycott. She was there to greet them as the wagon pulled back around. Nick got out slowly, working out the kinks before lifting Cindy down.
Yeah.
Joy grinned. That's why Dad stopped taking us on sleigh rides years ago. None of us complained. Doesn't matter. Nick slung an arm over Joy's shoulders and brought her closer. It was perfect. What's up next? Lunch at Santa's workshop.
What?
Cindy's eyes nearly bugged out of her head. Nick turned to whisper in Joy's ear. I heard you can't get in there without a reservation. Just last weekend, a couple of weary female shoppers had sat at the bar and complained they'd waited too long to reserve a table. Don't you remember? I used to work there, Joy whispered back, her breath warm across the shell of his ear. We're in the back, but we're in. Thank you. And because she was fulfilling her end of the bargain and he was filled with holiday spirit, Nick pressed a kiss to the top of Joy's head. She stiffened, but didn't shift away as they walked to his truck. Nick held her close. He liked having her near, liked holding her, liked the way she smelled, like vanilla and Christmas trees. If she saw his smile, he bet she'd know he liked her, too. Chapter 5. Nick had never been to Santa's workshop. It was the realm of those with children. 11 months out of the year, Santa's workshop was better known as Scotty's Cafe, where hostesses and waitstaff wore kilts. But from Thanksgiving to New Year's, Scotty's, which was located right next door to the biggest toy store in town, transformed into Santa's workshop. The hostesses and waitstaff wore green tunics, green tights, and red pointed elf caps. There were toys in display cases and craft stations set up so that children could work with the elves to make toys and gifts. They dropped off the tree at Nick's house, put it in a bucket of water, and made their reservation on time. Joy was a miracle worker. The noise in Santa's workshop rivaled school recess. Cindy skipped after the hostess between tables crowded with parents and grandparents trying to please tired, cranky, overexcited children. Joy followed Cindy at a more sedate pace, leaving Nick to bring up the rear. Joy was right. Their reservation was all the way in the back. While Nick moved through the dining room, silence and whispered questions rippled in his wake. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't the town villain. He couldn't understand the hubbub his presence caused. They were seated at a small table barely big enough for two, much less three. Nick's knee bumped Joy's. She edged her chair back to give him space. The hostess elf whisked Cindy away to check out the craft tables, of which she could pick 2 activities of the 4 available. What's wrong? Joy rested her elbows on the table and trapped his gaze. You look like you could use a drink. Everyone's looking at me. She gave the room a quick perusal. Just the moms. Her smile teased. You should be used to women looking at you. He was. But not like I'm the Grinch walking into Whoville ready to ruin Christmas. Hey, you are who you are. What? The Grinch? You're a bachelor half the women in town chased after and were quickly dumped by. She pointed to a table by the entrance with 3 pouty toddlers. Diane Smith, now Diane Watson. You dumped her after she took you to the Sadie Hawkins dance. She pointed to the next table where a pregnant woman was rocking a crying toddler. Leah Harris got you to take her to a rave in the city one night. You never took her anywhere again. Her finger shifted toward the next table. Nick caught it, pulling her hand beneath the table into his lap. I know who I dated. Yes, but you don't seem to know how only landing a date or 2 with you bruised their ego. She gave a light tug to her hand, but he clasped it in both of his. You're reading too much into my social life. Look in their eyes, Nick. Imagine you as the George Clooney of Brody Falls and each of them is Stacy Keibler, the woman who almost got him to marry her. I didn't ask any of those women. I know. But in their minds, they came this close to landing Brody Falls' most confirmed bachelor. That was frightening. And explained a lot about the women he'd been dating lately. You don't look at me that way. I never dated you. The spark fizzled from her tone. You rejected me, remember? I'm just another little sister to you. You're not my little sister, he said gruffly. You stopped being that when you turned 16. Her cheeks pinkened. Let's not bring that up. You were horrified. I was intrigued. He softened his voice to its most seductive, because a part of him couldn't forget her kiss and apparently he had a reputation to uphold. I'd never thought of you that way. And then, is it too late to call Santa? Cindy climbed into her seat, face flushed and smiling. I want a dollhouse like that. She pointed to a dollhouse that looked like a mountain cabin. Nick sat up and took notice. I want grilled cheese, Cindy said. Do they have grilled cheese? But no pickle. No pickle on my bread. Cindy was wound up. What happens after lunch? More shopping, Joy said cheerfully. We already bought a tree. Cindy rubbed her eyes. Yes, but we need cookie ingredients, wrapping paper, tacky holiday sweaters, white elephant gifts, and candy canes, Cindy said firmly. She noticed her placemat was a coloring page and set to work scribbling green over the Christmas tree in wide, outside the line strokes. Yes, sweetie, Joy reassured her. Candy canes. Do you know what kind of cookies you like? The kind with frosting, Nick said absently. The kind with frosting shaped like Santa, Cindy said. Can we call Santa? I'll send him a text. Nick pulled out his phone. Cindy's hazel eyes widened. You have his number? Mrs. Claus gave it to me. Might just as well use the number the love advice lady had finally given him as he'd loaded her into a taxi last night. After they placed their lunch order, Nick and Cindy went to the workstation where they pounded nails into wooden toy cars that would be donated to needy children. Next they decorated 6-inch stockings with glitter. Cindy's red stocking had a pimple of green glitter, which upon seeing Joy pronounced priceless, like that easy button they show on TV, only green. Nick had the strangest feeling in his chest, an aching, tense feeling. A month ago, he would have looked at the time, counting down the minutes until he'd be released from Santa's workshop. But Joy and Cindy made it fun. Joy loved Christmas and kids, and it made Nick love Christmas and kids and, yes, even Santa's workshop. "When are you going to give up this boycott idea?" he asked as their food was delivered. "Never." Joy couldn't have been more emphatic if she was turning down sun-warmed sushi. "Never. That's a betting word." He grinned at Cindy, who ignored him. She'd pivoted in her chair to be able to see all the action in the room while she ate her grilled cheese sandwich. "As soon as I have you guys set up, I'm hibernating in my apartment. But you'll go to see your dad on Christmas, even if you don't go to the party on Christmas Day." Joy bit her lip and looked as if she wanted to go home. "You've got to see your dad on Christmas." Nick took her hand in his. "Whether this boycott gets you what you want or not. Your mom wouldn't want you to abandon your dad on such a special day." The boycott had to be eating her up inside. She and her dad were close. He wanted to make Joy smile again. "What can I do to help stop the wedding?" Joy considered him for, like, a millisecond, and then a smile burst on her face bigger than an exploding 4th of July firework. "You can seduce Penny." Joy was still enamored of her idea an hour later at Walmart. "I'll back off on my seduction request," she told Nick. "If you just turn on the charm a little. What's the harm in a little flirting or a kiss or two under the mistletoe?" "I'm not a man whore," Nick said through gritted teeth, keeping his angry voice at sane person volume so as not to upset Cindy, who sat in the cart singing Christmas carols with the piped music filling the crowded store. "Is that what you think of me?" No, nothing like a supersized dose of shame to take the wind out of her sails. "I'm desperate. I'm sorry." Besides, the more she thought about Nick kissing Penny, the less she liked the idea. Today he'd been the Nick of her childhood, charming, goofy, sensitive, fun to be with. And oh, so ruffled about his reputation and what she thought of him. "Oh, look. Tacky sweaters." Just the distraction she needed to soothe the big man beside her. They began sliding hangers around the circular rack, which was surprisingly full considering it was almost Christmas. "Here's one." He'd found a hideous, salmon-colored sweater with a reindeer head and antlers that dangled like dog ears. "What do you think? Is it my color?" Nick held it up to his chest. Cindy tried to flatten the antlers upward, laughing when they kept flopping down. "It's you," Joy said, meaning it. He stood in his steel-in boots, comfortably faded blue jeans, and black leather jacket, smiling as if fashion and appearances meant nothing to him. He was better than her childhood memories. But Joy didn't want to fall for him again. It didn't matter if she'd be rejected right away or experience a few heavenly dates. Nick wasn't the kind of guy a girl had a long-term relationship with. She didn't want to be one of those women from Santa's workshop. She'd much prefer to be his friend. She ignored the wistful sigh that escaped, and led the pair to the holiday decoration section next. It was tough going. People kept stopping their carts midstream, blocking traffic. Nick hesitated as they passed a nearly bare display of holiday stockings, a flash of longing in his eyes. "Don't we need one of these?" He looked at Cindy, but his hand rested on a blue velvet stocking with gold trim. It was similar to the one Joy had as a child. The one her mother had embroidered. She loved looking at it every year and thinking about how much love went into making it. "It has to be red." Cindy pointed to the few remaining red ones. "Like Santa's suit." A red stocking was added to the cart. A few sections of shelves further down the aisle they passed packages of cheap nylon Santa suits. Cindy frowned. "What are those for?" "For parties where guys dress up as Santa." Nick picked up a package. "Joy's dad wears one every year." Joy wasn't betting on him wearing a Santa suit this year, not unless they made them in pink. Her pinkness had taken over every aspect of the holiday. And by boycotting it and her dad, Joy had let her. She hadn't thought of it that way before. Had she and Kyle made a tactical error? They'd assumed Dad would realize how much he was missing by them staying away. That's weird. Cindy frowned at the package some more, shades of Santa doubt in her eyes. The little girl was too young to lose that magic. My mom used to love seeing my dad wear that costume. Joy selected a plush Santa hat and put it in the cart. Mom used to say she fell in love with Dad all over again when he wore that suit. My daddy needs one of those. Cindy tilted her face up to Nick, looking as if tears might be in the forecast. Am I getting a divorce, Uncle Nick? I don't know. Nick lifted her out of the cart and into his arms. But if you are getting a divorce, your mom and dad will still love you. That won't change. Cindy wrapped her arms around his neck, resting her head on his shoulder. I'm never getting married, just like you. See? Joy pushed the cart toward the next aisle. Even a child knows you're George Clooney. He narrowed his eyes and nudged her with his shoulder. Hey, George is married. Even I know that. He didn't get married until he was in his 50s. She rounded the corner to the Christmas decorations. Shoot. There's nothing left. Nothing but people like them, slowly traversing the empty aisle, looking slightly panicked. We can go to another store, Nick offered. I have time before my shift. No. We can pick up some decorations from Dad's house tomorrow. He has plenty that aren't pink. And Joy was feeling the need to talk to him. She peeked at Cindy's face. Poor thing. We wore her out. She's asleep. After waiting in a line that couldn't have moved much slower, Nick paid for everything. They loaded up Nick's truck and strapped Cindy in her car seat. I've got to work tonight, he said. But I'm off the next 3 days. He drove them out of the parking lot. Which is good, because that sitter we've got is something of a caution. Do you trust her? I can babysit. Joy sank in the soft leather, feeling as worn out as Cindy. It's not that I don't trust her. Nick kicked up the heater. It's that she's got this idea in her head that I should settle down. You'll make a good dad someday, Joy said without thinking. Red alert. Red alert. Immediate course correction. He probably thought she was imagining having his babies. Not that I'm fishing in that pond. Thankfully, Nick didn't respond. I'll come over after breakfast tomorrow. Cindy and I can bake while you put up the tree, and then we'll swing by Dad's place for ornaments and tree lights. He bought several packages of outdoor lights at the store. If you're boycotting the holiday, you can't eat any of those cookies, Nick reminded her. Why is it so important to you that I go all in on Christmas? Because you represent Christmas to me. I had 10 years in foster care with 3 different sets of foster parents. Nowhere felt like a true Christmas, except your place. That was my parents. If only Mom hadn't died of cancer. If only she hadn't given Penny her blessing to approach Dad about a loan. If only's felt like they'd be the death of her. No. It was you, too. Nick spared her a glance, but his voice wasn't spare. It was filled with caring and urgency. Don't do this to yourself. You bleed red and green. Nick. Don't give up a part of yourself over your pride. He reached over and clasped her hand. It doesn't matter who your dad chooses to be with or what color ornaments get put on the tree. You love giving and creating special moments people remember. And your mom wouldn't approve of the boycott. Nick, a massive hit of pink appeared before them before she could acknowledge Nick might be right, but it was too late to turn back. Stop. Stop right here. And tell me if you think that my mother would approve of that. He pulled over in front of her father's house. It was hideous. There were pink and blue flocked Christmas trees on the lawn and an inflatable snow globe with a pink elephant with purple polka dots. Pink flamingos grazed across the landscape. The oak tree trunk was wrapped in wide pink ribbon, with pink bows in the branches. The candy canes that lined the walkway had been sprayed pink and an inflatable Santa sat in Barbie's child-size pink Jeep. Nick pulled slowly away. Well, the good news is Penny didn't put baby Jesus in the Jeep. It's not Christmas yet. Joy slumped in her seat. Was this really the way Dad wanted to live? Drat and darn. She was going to have to put on her big girl panties and ask him. Chapter 6. Turns out, it was Dad who extended an olive branch. He texted Kyle and Joy breakfast invitations that night, mentioning the need to plan for the annual family Christmas party. Joy slept better that night than she had in weeks. Surely, this meant Dad was coming to his senses? Thank you for meeting me for breakfast. Dad sat across from Kyle and Joy in Beverly's diner the morning after Joy had seen his holiday decor. He was once more well turned out in a green polo and black khakis. Kudos to Penny for upping his look. Still, thank you for not bringing Penny. It was 8 days until the wedding. Joy hoped Dad's early morning request to meet meant he'd finally realized he'd made a mistake. If so, she might still have time to put up Mom's ornaments and reminisce about her with Dad and Kyle. Dad frowned. Kyle elbowed Joy and nodded toward the diner's entrance. The front door swung open and Penny walked in as "Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree" played. She wore pink tights, white leather boots, and a chunky fisherman's sweater. Her long blonde hair swung behind her as if she hadn't a care in the world. Not exactly the picture of a jilted bride. Dad, Joy let her disappointment set into her voice. We're family, Dad said, sounding as if he'd never change his mind, even if hell froze over. Let's start acting like it. Sorry I'm late. Penny slid into the booth next to Dad. I had to drop off some turkeys to the Salvation Army. She kissed her fingertip and then pressed it to Dad's lips. What did I miss, honey poo? Dad blushed. We're just about to discuss plans for the annual Christmas party. Kyle, Joy, and Dad had been planning it together since Mom died when Joy was 10. No one need worry about that. Penny smiled as if she'd found the answer to world peace. I know every year Joy stresses about it, but I've got it covered. A pink ribbon of dread made a tight, ugly bow around Joy's chest. Penny didn't cook. If she was taking over, they'd be eating microwave popcorn at the party. Not that Joy was coming to see it. We always cook a traditional dinner, Dad said, mild concern blending with the coddling tone he used with Penny. He sounded like he was talking to a favorite puppy he suspected of misbehaving. I've hired a caterer. Penny fidgeted in her seat like that overly excited puppy Dad just had to adopt. That's very sweet of you, isn't it, guys? Dad wasn't the big spending type. He looked like his wallet was pinching his behind. He waved the waitress off. Joy had to ask. What kind of food is the caterer providing? Mexican. Penny brightened. Everyone loves Mexican. Just not on Christmas Day. Dad paled. He loved the pomp and ceremony of carving a turkey in front of his guests. Maniacal laughter echoed in Joy's head. It banged around until it dropped in her throat and she nearly choked. This had to be the end of the nuptials. What happened to the turkeys Dad bought a couple of weeks ago? Kyle was as ruthless as Joy. He knew where those organic, free-range, expensive turkeys were. Never fear. Penny had such a sweet smile when she wasn't being selfish. They'll be feeding the needy this holiday season. I just dropped them off. Game, set, and match, Kyle murmured. Joy wanted to high-five him. I also emailed the guests and told them to bring their swimsuits. Penny gushed like she had when planning teenage sleepovers. Honey Pooh is having a hot tub installed tomorrow. It's my Christmas present. Dad stroked his neck repeatedly. He'd either missed some whiskers when shaving this morning, or he was trying to calm down. There was finally trouble in paradise. What about the ugly sweater contest? Kyle grinned. He was enjoying watching Dad squirm as much as Joy was. Everyone expects that. But it's so ugly. Penny frowned. Elvis began lamenting a blue Christmas. Dad's corneas looked about to pop. He'd won 3 of the last 4 years of ugly sweater contests. He had a trophy made and everything. And the white elephant gift exchange? Joy tried to keep her tone as innocent as Cindy's, but the laughter was back, tickling her throat. Last year I got a roll of toilet paper. Penny drew back in her seat, seemingly offended. Things are going to change. We're classing the party up. Forget eggnog. She smiled at Joy. Can Nick bartend? You and I have had some good times over margaritas. Joy was taken aback by the turn in the conversation. You'd have to ask him. Penny's smile had sly written all over the corners. But you're dating, I thought. Back up. Kyle jerked his shoulders around to face Joy. You're dating Nick? Oh, no. A trap. A trap. Dad's face regained some of its color. I'm helping him set up a Christmas for his niece. That's all. It wasn't all, a tiny voice inside Joy said, but she ignored it. He said you couldn't come over the other night because you'd made plans. Penny's eyes were batting 1,000, blink blink, blink blink. And Joy didn't have a change-up in her arsenal. Why is everyone looking at me like that? As if she'd become a victim of the town man whore. Penny went in for the kill. Maybe because you've been in love with him since you were 4. I'm going to kill Nick, Kyle said. He's your best friend. This was ridiculous. Joy tried to give Kyle the high sign and get him back on track, getting Dad's life on track, not hers. You know Nick better than anyone else. Yep. Kyle scowled. And that's why I'm going to kill him. I might just as well say I'm going to kill Penny, Joy said. You want to kill me? Penny clutched Honey Pooh's arm. You're my best friend. Was that sympathy in Dad's eyes? For Penny? Police. A child, Cindy, could see through Penny's act. Why couldn't her father? Love was truly legally blind. I told Nick he couldn't date you when you turned 16. Kyle slapped his palm on the table. A guy shouldn't have to tell his best friend more than once. I told him to give you space when you turned 21, Dad admitted, somewhat perversely since he was no longer the one suffering. Some guys just aren't made to settle down. Joy felt the first stirrings of anger. You both told Nick to stay away? Did I do something wrong, Joy? Penny asked, blinking her eyes as if she had a speck of dust in both blue orbs. We used to be so close and now you want to kill me. Fortunately, no one was paying attention to her. The Encastle men were too busy butting into Joy's life. Yes. I told him to stay away. Kyle tossed his hands. You threw yourself at him. I was right there in the hallway behind you. Anger wouldn't let Joy be embarrassed. And I overheard your birthday plans to get drunk and kiss Nick. Dad crossed his arms over his chest and gave her the you better behave eye. Penny smirked. Anger flared higher and burned a hole in her stomach, worse than any worry or frustration had burned through her over Dad's impending marriage. She'd been too stressed out for too long, and it was all bubbling up and projecting outward. She could feel herself losing control, feel anger take over. Yet she was helpless to stop it. The Encastle line stops with you too. You'd better sleep with one eye open from now on. You should thank me. Kyle ran a hand through his shaggy hair. Nick burns through women like a chain smoker goes through cigarettes. Penny's selfishness. Dad's late midlife crisis. Kyle's meddling. It all spun together in her stomach. Joy couldn't take it anymore. The anger shot through her veins and hit the release button on her tongue. I'm going to date Nick just to drive you too crazy. I don't understand why Joy wants to kill me. Penny was riding her own train on a track meant to derail Joy. What have I done? Oh, Penny had played that innocent card once too often. Joy's anger turned on her former BFF. You slept with my father, who's old enough to be your father, Joy shouted, sounding like a wounded alley cat. Everyone in the diner stopped talking. Even the Christmas music seemed to pause and wait. Penny sat back as if Joy had slapped the guile right out of her. I told you that hadn't happened yet, she whispered, clutching Honey Pooh's arm. Honey Pooh was speechless. Oh, save it and the innocent act for your precious holiday party. Joy stood. Dad, I'm coming by later to borrow some ornaments for Nick's place, not because I'm sleeping with him. She aimed that remark at her idiot brother. But because his niece deserves a nice, traditional holiday without gender-bending Barbie pink. Penny gasped. Dad and Kyle glared. Joy walked away. I expect to see you Christmas Day, Dad called after her. In my bikini or my ugly holiday sweater? Joy shouted over her shoulder. When Joy arrived at his house, Nick had made sure he wasn't wearing a tutu. If my brother calls you, don't pick up, Joy said, charging inside with a bag of supplies. He thinks we're having an affair thanks to Penny, who isn't good enough for you to seduce. Agreed. Nick followed her inside. Don't worry about Kyle. Cindy's playing Candy Crush on my phone. He leaned against the kitchen counter and gauged her mood as she unloaded groceries. My brother and Dad think you're not good enough for me. She said it like it was no big deal. Nick thought about it a minute and then he laughed. Okay. Okay? She stopped moving, stopped huffing, and faced him. What happened to Mr. I'm not George Clooney? And why didn't you tell me my brother warned you away when I was 16? Her brown eyes blazed with hurt and anger. The hurt through him. Was she hurt by her family's protectiveness? Or by Nick not making a pass at her? Or both? Maybe Nick should have worn a tutu, because he needed something to throw her off her game. Joy wasn't usually this hard to read. You might have, I don't know, gotten upset? Like she was now. And when I was 21? When Dad butted in. I thought he had your best interests at heart. You liked me. The hurt and anger drained from Joy's features and she smiled. A big, broad, dang you make me happy smile. If you didn't care, you would have ignored them. Nick felt a smile of his own blossoming on his face. I liked you when you kissed me, too. I never, you must be thinking about someone else. She turned away, her cheeks as red as Santa's coat. Nick felt a smile radiating from his chest in the exact spot the love advice lady had said was hollow. Joy did remember that kiss on her 21st birthday. Not that he'd get her to admit it. At least, not this minute. This was shaping up to be his best Christmas ever. Cindy kicked her feet against the couch cushions. Are we ever doing Christmas? Of course, we are. Joy was banging around Nick's kitchen. Nick is going to set up the tree and we're going to bake. Nick already set up the tree. He pointed at it, amazed she'd missed it. I'll watch television until the cookies are ready. Oh, no you don't. You can put up those outdoor lights you bought yesterday while we bake. Don't worry. We'll let you know when the goodies are ready. So this was what it was like to be nagged by a significant other. Nick liked it. He grinned and turned to go. Oh, and Nick. She hesitated. Just, don't answer the phone if it's Kyle. I'm not going to avoid him. Kyle was his best friend. I'm afraid he's not going to avoid you either. She helped Cindy sit on a bar stool at the counter. When you finish, we should be at a point where we can run over to Dad's house for some Christmas ornaments. Maybe we'll get lucky and he'll be out shopping. She sighed. Although I really should talk to him. If he's there and you don't want to talk, we could always put on a show. Nick stopped short of completing that thought, you know. Kiss or something. He could tell by Joy's widening eyes, she knew what he was thinking. Chapter 7. Dad, I'm home, Joy called out as she unlocked the front door. Is your phone dead? I couldn't get an answer. She keyed in the security code, hoping Dad wasn't avoiding her calls. And I've got company. She turned. Is this Barbie's house? Cindy took in all the pink decorations in open-mouthed wonder. There were pink snowflake garlands along the railing, pink wreaths on the wall, pink glass jar luminaries, pink stockings hung over the chimney, and an 8-foot, white plastic tree with white lights and pink ornaments. Holy emasculation. Nick stepped into the sunken living room. Is it pink everywhere? I don't know. Joy couldn't move. It was beautiful and wrong at the same time. Oh, Mom. I haven't seen the kitchen. Which they usually decorated, too. Along with the hall bathroom and the back patio. Something scuttled in the kitchen, like a large rat. There's no pink in the kitchen, Dad called in a desperate-sounding voice. Dad? What's wrong? Joy asked. What's that noise? Nothing. I was just napping. Oops, Joy whispered to Nick. We caught the old man during nap time. Since he'd retired, Dad had become a napaholic, during which time he shed all but his boxers. Do you need your bathrobe? I can get it for you. Nick's cell phone buzzed. It's a text from Kyle. I'm telling him we're here. There was more scuttling in the kitchen and what sounded like whispers. Dad? Joy crossed the living room, heading toward the kitchen. We should go, Nick said, taking Joy by the arm and pulling her back, adding in a whisper, he's not alone. A pit of something extremely unpleasant formed in Joy's stomach, reminiscent of the morning's anger. She freed her arm. Wait for the wedding, my armpit. I came by for some Christmas decorations. We need them for Nick's place. How nice. Dad sounded like it was anything but nice. How are you, Nick? I'm good, Mr. Encastle. Just head on back to the sewing room, Joy. Take whatever you need. I'll also need the spare cookie sheets, Joy said peevishly, payback for him telling Nick to back off when she was 21. She knew who was in there with him. Decorations first, Dad called in a high-pitched, panicky voice. Joy marched to the sewing room, followed by Nick and Cindy. She opened the sewing room door just in time to see something flash by the window heading toward the side gate and the front of the house. Something about Joy's height with blonde hair and hot pink lingerie. The anger erupted as hot and crazy as it had been that morning. That lying hypocrite. Nick had both hands over Cindy's eyes. His grin was wicked. Christmas came early for me this year. What? What is it? Cindy tried to pry Nick's hands away. Is it Santa? Nope, he said, laughter brimming in his voice. It's not even Mrs. Claus. Joy ran to the front door and pressed the emergency alarm button. The doors and the backyard gates auto-locked with loud clicks. A siren began to wail. Soon, the entire neighborhood, most of whom were on vacation or permanently retired, would be by to see what all the fuss was about. And they'd find Penny the slut outside in the front yard. Ho ho ho. Joy Encastle. What have you done? Her dad stood in the midst of his sparkly pink living room. His paunch hung over the waistband of satin Barbie and Ken boxers. His toenails were painted hot pink. I can't unsee that. Joy shaded her eyes. But I did see someone lurking outside. Joy backed up to the closet and tugged his raincoat free of the coats smashed together inside. You know how burglars are at the holidays. You can't be too careful. Joy. Here's your flasher raincoat, old man. She tossed it to him. I hope you make it through this midlife crisis without being arrested. It's not a midlife crisis. He tugged on the raincoat at the speed of a fireman jumping into his turnout gear for a fire. At my age, it's a second chance. On the other side of the front door, Penny shrieked. Or maybe it was Mrs. Forsythe next door. She was kind of a prude, although she had great taste in holiday sweaters. Honey Pooh? Daddy? Penny pounded on the door. Open up. Joy had been about to head to the sewing room. Instead, she crossed her arms and planted her feet. She calls you Daddy? Did you tell her mom used to change her diapers? Her father cinched his raincoat and seemed to gather himself. Well, I never changed her diapers. No? Well, if you marry her, she's not the type to stick around and change yours, so you'll be even. She gestured to the living room. Look at this. There's not a trace of mom anywhere. Is that what you want? Before he had a chance to answer, Penny was shouting again. Joy? I know you're in there. It sounded like Penny pounded the door with both hands. And then she shrieked again. Do not take a picture of me. Do not. Daddy. Dad's face paled. Joy left him and returned to the sewing room. Her blood was pounding in her temples and her legs felt as if she'd run a 10K race. She drew a breath and tried to calm down, sifting through the stacks of boxes. Let's see. 2 boxes of ornaments. 1 of lights and 1 of ribbon. Oh, look. There's the box of stockings. She made a stack of the boxes she wanted by the door. Penny shrieked again. Is there a robber outside? Cindy sat in the shelter of Nick's lap in the wingback chair Mom used to sew in. The little girl lowered her voice to a whisper. Or is it Bigfoot? Oh, sweetie. There's a lost Barbie doll on the porch, that's all. Nick grinned. He was enjoying this as much as Joy was. Except for the shrieking part, which was making Joy feel bad. And the part where she'd seen Dad in his skivvies. In fact, it was all slowing down and turning the back of her throat sour. Had she really done that to Penny? Her father keyed the code to stop the alarm and unlock everything. There was a brief moment of silence and then Penny's shrieking, traumatized voice pierced the air. Don't touch me, Henry. Kyle came to my rescue, not you. Her voice rumbled with rage. Where's Joy? She humiliated me in front of the entire neighborhood. Mrs. Forsythe made the sign of the cross. And Carl Brown took pictures. He's probably posting them to social media right now. Penny sobbed, racking sounds that bashed Joy's resolve. I used to babysit him. The first wave of pity penetrated Joy's adrenaline shield. Bad Barbie is coming inside, Cindy wailed, putting her hands over her ears. Joy felt numb. She's just mad, sweetie. She won't hurt you. Penny is my friend. Penny kicked open the sewing room door and assumed her kickboxing-ready position. Pink wonder bra, pink thong, pink heels. Kyle's unzipped black jacket did little to cover anything. Cindy buried her face in Nick's shoulder and wailed louder. Penny flicked her fingers at Joy in a bring it gesture. Joy held up her palms. I'm sorry. I went too far. I cracked. Are you happy? Karma was going to make sure Joy paid for that someday. Probably by making sure Penny's dream wedding became a reality. Dad appeared behind Penny in his trench coat. The pink of his toenails were in stark contrast to his lily-white, hairy legs. Kyle peered over Dad's shoulder, grinning like Nick had been. The bushes outside the window rustled. Stop taking pictures, Carl. Penny was spitting mad. Her spittle cascaded on Joy. Carl gleefully ignored Penny and pushed right up to the window, cell phone in hand. That kid had a paparazzi career in his future. Someone banged on the front door. Open up, police. The police! Penny shouted. And then she ran down the hall toward the master bedroom. I'm not done with you, Joy. Joy kind of thought they were. Dad hung his head and went to the front door. Kyle shrugged, still grinning, and followed. Nick and Joy exchanged glances. "Are we done here?" he asked. "Overdone." Joy was exhausted. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Nick set Cindy on her feet and grabbed a box, grinning. Best Christmas ever. Chapter 8. My dad just texted me. The police are billing him $50 for a false alarm. Joy's eyes sparkled as she did a really bad victory dance around Nick's Christmas tree. Penny's AWOL and he's going to bill me. Worth every penny? Nick leaned over the back of the couch and tucked a blanket around a snoozing Cindy, sprawled on the couch after a full day of holiday preparations. The sun had set long ago and the tree lights reflected in the window gave the room a double glow of festive. Nick couldn't have been happier. He'd always considered his small bungalow home, but now it looked like one, especially with Joy dancing around in it. I'm going to hell for this, but yes. Worth every penny. Joy sat back down on the hearth and ate the popcorn left over from the garland she'd made. Am I allowed to say that and feel sorry for Penny? Am I allowed to say I've never understood your friendship with her? If Penny had a heart, it was buried beneath heavy makeup and wrapped in too tight clothes. He planted his hands on the couch back when what he really wanted to do was plant his hands on Joy's hips and tug her close for a kiss. We were the only girls on a street filled with boys. The energy ebbed from Joy's words like a receding tide. Penny was the youngest of 5 and her parents were always working.
Yeah.
But she was spoiled and it got worse with age. Why stay friends? When you were in school, she never let you go first at anything. She always wanted what you had. There was one event that really annoyed Nick. Remember the time Bobby Andre asked you to prom and she made him take her instead? You never talked to Bobby again. The same way she'd snubbed him when he rejected her 16-year-old spunky self. A girl has to have some pride. But you stayed friends with Penny. She fixed me up with Edgar Latville. Her voice had that consolation prize quality to it, as if she was trying to muster enthusiasm for ending up with a lesser choice. Besides, Penny was a child of divorce. That can really make it hard on a kid. Amazing. After everything that had happened, Joy still defended Penny. Nick didn't know whether to be angry or proud.
Yeah.
But look at you. Your mother died when you were 10 and you didn't turn out to be a selfish, psychotic bee. My mother told me to be nice to her. Joy's voice was as thin as tinsel. She said Penny and I would need each other, which she will if she has my father's children. She set the popcorn bowl aside. What would my mother say about today? She was always nice to everyone. Come here. Nick moved around the couch and held out a hand, drawing Joy to her feet and into his arms. She snuggled against his chest. This was what he'd been waiting years for without knowing he'd been waiting. Penny pushed you to the edge. I'm amazed you lasted this long. He stroked her soft hair, breathing in the scent of Christmas tree and vanilla. Your mom would be proud of you. The fire crackled. Its light bathed them in warmth. Nick could stay that way forever. No. I was holding out for the wrong things and hurt the wrong people. She fisted her hands in his t-shirt. I made Kyle boycott Christmas, including all the charity work we normally do. I said awful things to my dad. My mom would not be proud of me. I've been thinking about the day we met. Nick took her hands, giving the cotton of his t-shirt some relief. It was Christmas Eve. Hannah was 6. I was 8. And I was almost 5. She gave him a hesitant smile. I remember worrying that Santa wouldn't find you or your sister. When your dad brought us home, Kyle was at choir practice. You took us around the house and explained about Christmas. Her cheeks deepened to a rich pink. I was young. You were kind. There wasn't a jealous, evil bone in your body. I think you stole my heart when you gave up your holiday stocking for my sister the next morning. He gave her hands a gentle squeeze. Do you remember? It was blue and gold. She nodded, eyes shining with unshed tears. It represented how much she loved me. I expected your parents to make some excuse to stop you from giving Hannah the stocking, but they stood arm in arm, smiling and proud. I think your mother might have cried. I wish I remembered that. She passed a hand near her eye. As the years go by, it feels as if I remember her less and less. You gave Hannah and me the perfect Christmas that year. Our foster parents couldn't compete. She stepped out of his embrace and mustered a smile. Cindy's Christmas will be special, too. How often does a kid get to be spoiled by their uncle? He didn't want to talk about his niece. I want to kiss you. Joy barely batted an eyelash, but she did back up a step. You say that to all the girls. In fact, I heard you say it to Bunny at the holiday party. I've kissed my share of females. And apparently, he needed a new lexicon to go about doing it, one that was unique to Joy, because he couldn't imagine wanting to kiss anyone else. She was one of a kind. Who else would revel in victory and then admit she had regrets? You've probably hit a quota. She picked up the popcorn bowl and carried it to the kitchen. You don't need to kiss one more. I haven't kissed anyone in quite a while. That would explain you asking me. It only proved some people were slow to learn what they really wanted. He wanted joy and honesty and Christmases filled with laughter. You've always underestimated yourself. I remember how you carried your books in high school. You tried to hide behind them. That was the first time I realized I wanted to kiss you. All this time. She moved to the tree and its twinkling lights, a sad longing in her eyes. You've never asked to kiss me before. Yet you honored what my dad and my brother requested, instead of honoring what you thought you wanted. That makes me believe you didn't really want to kiss me. You just wondered about it occasionally, perhaps when the queue in your line of readily available women got low. She thought she wasn't his type. She was talking herself out of a kiss when he knew they both wanted it. I kept away because you're Kyle's little sister. And being a part of the Encastle family was more important to me than following my instincts. But I don't care about any of that now. I'm ready. He swallowed, not because he doubted his statement, but because he was suddenly worried he'd let too many opportunities with Joy pass him by. You're old enough. You've had dating experience. You should know when a guy is really interested in you and knows how to do Christmas right. You should know what you want and be able to reach for it. He waited for her to reach for him. And waited. It's late. We're both tired. She kept staring at the star on top of the tree. It was a burst of glitter and gold that caught the light and reflected it back into the room. One of the last ornaments her mother had purchased before she died. She'd be proud, Nick said softly as he joined her, glancing at the felt tree skirt with Mrs. Claus dancing at their feet. What's on the docket for tomorrow? You need to buy Cindy's presents. Can you do that alone or do you need me to babysit? She stretched to adjust the popcorn garland over a high branch to the side, struggling with it. Nick reached past her to help, his arm brushing over hers. I bought her some things during my dinner break the other night. I just need to wrap them. Joy rocked back on her heels. Her back bumped against his chest. For a moment, neither one of them moved. What are you doing? She whispered. I said I wanted to kiss you. Nick. There was a lot of rejection packed into the way she spoke his name. And a lot of yearning, too. This is a bad idea. He noticed she didn't move away. You know me. He turned her around. I'm George Clooney. I excel at bad ideas. But even old George finally got it right and settled down. He probably got the perfect Christmas tree along with his perfect happily ever after. Her gaze stroked up his chest, his chin, came to meet his gaze. He hoped she saw in his eyes what he felt. Acceptance, love, home. It made perfect sense. They made perfect sense. Why hadn't he realized it before? He loved Joy. He loved the pragmatic, optimistic way she approached life. He loved her confidence and strength and sense of humor. He ran the back of his hand across her cheek. Her hands came to rest on his chest, delicate and warm. Gently, she pushed herself free, gathered her purse, shook her keys. Christmas comes once a year, Nick. This may seem perfect to you now, but what happens when the next holiday rolls around? Will you be in search of the perfect Valentine's date? He shook his head. There would only be her from now on. The other night, I accused Penny of wanting to play house with my dad, but I've been doing the same thing. She clutched her keys. I guess it was my way of having George Clooney without all the drama and heartbreak of being dumped. He could argue with her, but arguing with Joy was a no-win situation. Words would be exchanged. She'd get upset and go back to pretending he didn't exist, as she had been since she was 16 and Kyle interfered. If this was a game, it's been the best game ever. But it's not over. You promised to show me how to wrap and how to prep a turkey. See? Joy's shoulders drooped and she stared at the ceiling. Another example of poor timing. I was thinking this was my let him down gently speech. And I was thinking how refreshing it was to talk about feelings and obstacles in a relationship. Thank heavens he was in touch with his inner Oprah tonight. I'll walk you out. She picked up a box marked stockings that they'd taken from Mr. Encastle's house. No need. Oh, there was a need. If he let her put distance between them, he'd never get it back. I spent hours putting up those lights outside. You and I are going to take the time to enjoy them. That got a smile out of her. Her car was parked on the street beneath the elm tree in his front yard. She put the box in the trunk. To her credit, she didn't run for a quick getaway. She leaned against her car and studied his handiwork. The lights look great. The gables on this house make for a great outline. And there's not a pink bulb in sight. He stopped looking at her, and took it in. He'd done Christmas right. Well, what do you know? My house finally looks like it belongs. Every other house on the street had lights up. It hadn't bothered Nick that his was the only one without lights year after year. He'd always put them up after this. You have to share Christmas dinner with us. When she didn't answer, he said, Joy? HHMM? She seemed happy just looking at the lights, a dreamy expression on her face. He forgot about Christmas dinner. There's mistletoe in a branch above you. He'd spotted it this morning when he was stringing lights. She peered up. He stepped closer, settling his hands on her narrow waist. I'm going to kiss you now. It might be a total bust. Oh, man. He doubted that, especially given that one special birthday kiss. If so, we'll laugh about it in the morning. She sighed. I never realized what a talker you were. He took that for permission, and gently settled his mouth on hers. Before the kiss had a chance to deepen, she laughed and leaned away from him. That was like kissing my brother. What he felt wasn't brotherly. A torrent of energy welled inside him. Nick tugged her against him and kissed her the way he'd wanted to kiss her since she'd turned 21. Her body jolted and then melted against his. Her arms twined around his neck. She smelled like Christmas. She tasted of popcorn and her own brand of sweetness. Of the past and the present and, heaven help him, the future. It hit him like a strong gust off the ocean. How much he wanted her. Not just in his bed. But in his life. She was caring and gutsy. She didn't try to please him at the expense of her needs. She came to him as an equal and demanded to be treated as such. He'd thought he loved her earlier. But now he knew with a certainty that might have scared him if it wasn't Joy he had these feelings for. He ended the kiss slowly, pausing to lean his forehead on hers, waiting to hear her reaction, hoping it would be as wondrous as his own. Déjà vu, she said breathlessly, which he took as acknowledgement of their previous kiss. See you tomorrow, she said in a normal voice, ducking under his arm and walking around to the driver's side of her car. Had he lost his touch? Was his technique rusty? Did she not feel the love he had for her? Joy? She fumbled with her key fob. It fell to the ground. She wasn't as unaffected as he thought. Nick smiled. He waited until she'd found the fob and stood, meeting his gaze. He let his smile broaden. I'll be thinking about that kiss until we kiss again tomorrow. Chapter 9. The sun was just beginning to burn through the fog at the farmer's market on Christmas Eve morning. But Joy hadn't burned away thoughts of Nick, his determination to explore a relationship with her, and that kiss. His kiss was better than chocolate. Joy sighed dreamily. She'd been doing that a lot this morning, sighing, dreaming, wishing she could trust what Nick said about a long-term relationship with her was true. She'd stopped by the farmer's market to pick up her weekly supply of hothouse tomatoes, but she'd been sidetracked and bought Cindy a small gift at one of the booths she'd passed, a G.I. Joe coloring book. Another kiss would be dreamy and daring and disastrous. I thought I might find you here getting tomatoes. Penny appeared in the crowd in blue jeans and a baggy black sweater that was more like the Penny she used to know. Thoughts of kisses dissolved with the fog. Cat fights. An elderly woman's voice carried over the crowd. They only make things worse. Penny whipped around to confront the woman. She stalked over to the love advice table with a sway of hips and a swing of her long blonde hair. Joy followed in case Penny did anything stupid. Well, stupider than what she'd done to date this year. And besides, she wondered why Penny had been looking for her, and why she wasn't wearing pink, or false eyelashes, or a sweater that showed her push-up bra assets. You gave me advice last spring. Penny jabbed her finger in the old lady's direction. And now look at me. I'm about to have a nervous breakdown. No friends. No job. You told me everything would be clear. A block away, a choir began singing Frosty the Snowman. The love advice lady shook her head. I said when you found your destined hairstyle, you'd bump into true love. What is a destined hairstyle? Joy asked. The old woman smiled kindly at her. The perfect complement to the structure of your face and the wattage of your smile. She made a caressing gesture with her hands, as if framing Joy's face. Your hair is perfect. Of course, it is. Penny deadpanned. She tossed her ponytail over her shoulder. After I saw you, I went to a stylist. She said my perfect hairstyle is long. I walked out of there and bumped into her father. Penny pointed her thumb at Joy. That's what you meant when you said you'd found true love? Joy rolled her eyes. The love advice lady sked. I also told you which salon to go to and which stylist to see. Spa Perfection was too expensive. I told you I was between jobs. Penny tapped her boot impatiently. You're lazy and cheap. The old woman shrugged. And that is why you're engaged to the wrong man. Penny tossed her hands in the air. Now you tell me? I've walked by this booth at least 50 times since I got engaged. You're telling me 9 days before I make the biggest mistake of my life? Joy didn't dare breathe. The boycott had worked. The love lady shrugged again. You seemed so happy. I've been miserable. Penny scowled. Little blue pills. Hundreds of dollars in lingerie. Clothes so tight I couldn't breathe. Nothing worked for him. Not lotions or creams or oils. Oh, my, Joy murmured, the implication of her words sinking in. Can we not go into my dad's bedroom skills? Or lack thereof? He loves you. You can't dump him at Christmas. There. That should make Mom proud, although Kyle would have shot her for saying it. Penny smirked. Or I could marry Henry and take him for half of everything. Dump him, Joy blurted. He's strong. He'll recover. Penny hugged Joy. Maybe it was their history of friendship. Maybe it was the intense relief Joy felt at not having a stepmother the same age as she was. Joy hugged her back. Thanks. Penny scurried off in the direction of Spa Perfection, calling over her shoulder, "Your blessing means a lot to me." That is so not true. Joy gave the old lady a smile and turned to go, hothouse tomatoes in sight. Not so fast. The love lady grabbed her wrist. You're caught up in a kiss for all the wrong reasons. Oh. My. Goldfish. How did you? You've lost faith in the one person who deserves it. I may have lost faith in Penny, but she deserved it. And her dad. And Nick? No. She'd never really had expectations beyond a friendship with Nick. Dreams maybe. Sometimes a man can't see a guidepost for all the trees. The love advice lady's hands were cold. Don't blame him for not taking action before. You need to have faith in Christmas. She had to be talking about Dad. I know I've been radical this year about the holiday and stuff with Dad, but he'll get over Penny. And if he's lonely, he'll find someone else. Preferably someone his own age. Bah. The old lady waved a hand in Penny's direction. I'm not talking about your father's mistakes. I'm talking about Nicholas. Joy glanced around, looking for a tall, dark, handsome man in a leather jacket and killer boots. Did Nick put you up to this? He thought he had to kiss a lot of frogs, but that's another story. The love advice lady smiled. You need to stop boycotting Christmas. I have. Hadn't she been helping Nick for days? Your shirt says otherwise. Joy didn't have to look down to recall the words printed on her t-shirt. Crap. Winter is coming. With a picture of Santa looking forlorn. Okay, that's just because he. I was, Do you know what love is? It's the ability to care for someone despite their slights and their faults. It's the ability to reach out and trust that what they say is true and comes from the heart. Nick didn't really mean. I grow weary of your excuses. But the old lady didn't release Joy's wrist. Joy tugged. I think, we're done here. She hated the question in her tone. Suit yourself. The love advice lady squinted at her. Your friend did not pay me. She's about to break my father's heart. I'm not paying Penny's bill. Fine. She released Joy. Your bill is $40. I would have thought Dad would have called me by now. Joy sat at Nick's kitchen table, watching him wrap while Cindy took a nap. Joy hadn't arrived until 2 hours ago. The entire time, she'd been as nervous as a mouse trapped in a corner, keeping an eye on Nick and careful control of the conversation. Not even a text message. The oven, unused to being heated for anything other than frozen pizza, made a popping noise as it baked the turkey she'd helped him stuff. Maybe Penny hired the wrong stylist again. Maybe the guy she bumped into this time was less appealing than your dad. Ignoring the fact that the love advice lady had seemed to be steering him to Joy, and what good advice that was, Nick wasn't buying the hairstyle thing for Penny. He taped the corner fold down tight. Wrapping isn't hard. Right paper. Solid flat surface. Piece of cake. She scrolled through screens on her phone and then sat up. Penny just changed her status on social media to single. I should get over to Dad's. Nick placed a hand on her shoulder. Stay right here. Joy frowned. My dad needs me. She held up her phone. He's 60 and he's been dumped. Unless he reaches out, you need to leave him alone. But. He had pink toenails. A man needs to be alone to get over being led around like that. I need to apologize. I've been a manipulative jerk for nearly a month. Mom would. You understand nothing about the male ego. He stood and moved behind her chair, massaging her shoulders. She was knotted up tighter than the ribbon he'd just curled, and they hadn't even discussed that kiss last night. Maybe it's time you realized the boycott was less about saving your dad and more about saving your pride. You didn't trust him to come to the same conclusion you did about Penny. You don't trust my feelings for you. You're scared of us failing. You'd hate to be Stacy Keebler, the woman who almost got George Clooney to marry her. She slid out of the chair and came around to the other side of the table. How did we go from having a curiosity kiss to having a discussion on dating? You forget I've known you for more than 2 decades. I listen to what you say. I think about how you view the world. His gaze held hers. You're going to walk out that door and avoid me for another 10 years. She blushed and fidgeted, refusing to look at him. Trust me, Joy. Trust me when I say I love you that I mean it. Nick's entire being waited for her reaction, hoping she'd be brave enough to trust her heart to him. I've got to go, she said, studying her sneakers. You've got Christmas covered. My dad needs me. He wouldn't beg, but he couldn't just let her go. My invitation for Christmas dinner still stands. She hesitated, and then walked out without a word. He hoped she'd come back. He took in the changes she'd made to his home. Small wreaths flanked his television, Cindy's stocking hung from the mantel, and the tree looked perfect, especially with presents beneath it. That's when he saw the gifts she'd left under the tree. He didn't care that it wasn't officially Christmas. He couldn't wait. He ripped through the red foil paper with a combination of excitement and dread. Inside the box was a blue velvet stocking with gold trim. Not the one they'd seen at the store. It was the stocking she'd loaned to Hannah more than 20 years ago. She'd included a small folded note card. Because you've always deserved a perfect Christmas. Joy wasn't coming back for Christmas dinner. She wasn't coming back ever. Chapter 10. Dad? Joy entered her family's home and keyed the alarm system to off. It had been tough to walk away from Nick, but he was right. She wasn't willing to be with a man who didn't know how to love a woman, no matter how much her heart wanted to risk it. He'd said he loved her, and for a moment, she'd felt the rightness of it. Love sang through her veins. But how could she trust Nick, the town player, to know what true love really was? He had to be confusing the comfortable familiarity they'd experienced the past few days with a deeper emotion. But what if he hadn't? Her lungs suddenly felt deprived of air. If he loved her, the world would be a different place, brighter, happier, more alive with color. Although maybe not as pink as the living room before her. Her father wandered out of the kitchen in a ratty, brown-checked bathrobe. He hadn't shaved. His hair looked as if he'd ran his hands through it too many times. His bare feet had no trace of pink polish. He held up a yogurt. Can I interest you in a snack? No, Joy came down the steps into the living room. Are you okay? I heard about Penny. He stirred the remains of his yogurt, scraping the cup. I've been a fool. Love makes us do strange things, doesn't it? Joy sank into a chair. Happens to the best of us. Dad was handling this well. Why wasn't Joy feeling relieved? Maybe because your own heart is broken. The thing is, I knew Penny wasn't my soulmate. I was lonely. Dad. Hold on. He held a hand out. If I don't say this now, I never will. I knew something wasn't right with my romance, but I didn't want to admit it, especially when someone tried to force me. He gave her a serious look, and then set his spoon and yogurt cup on an end table. A fool and his pride, your mother used to say about me. And I was proud to have a beautiful woman interested in me. Love didn't blind me as much as my pride. Who can trust your emotions when you're afraid to know the truth? Was Joy dreaming? Or was karma trying to tell her something? Yes, her heart pounded out an answer. Nick loves you. And you love Nick. Anyway, I think for someone as stubborn as I am, I had to go through a loud, public spectacle to realize what I want out of life. He looked around at the havoc her pinkness had wrought. Sometimes it takes a man a couple failures to understand what's important. Really? She barely voiced the word. Nick had many romantic failures under his belt. It was the reason she'd doubted his love. I think someone more like Mrs. Forsyth is my speed. We've both been widowed, Anne. Joy stopped thinking about her own romantic woes and sat up straight. Does the word rebound mean anything to you? He chuckled. I promise to go slow. They both looked around at the pinkness. Penny had gone all out trying to prove there was love between them. By comparison, Nick hadn't done much except lay himself bare. And what had Penny done? Walked out on him. I can help you take this down. Joy sighed. It was going to be a big job. No. When we have our annual gathering tomorrow, I need to let everyone have a good laugh. His sigh matched hers. Besides, Penny might come by, and if it's all down it might hurt her feelings. Her dad was too nice. Mom would approve. Are you hungry for something besides yogurt? I could run down to the store and grab something for dinner. Actually, Mrs. Forsyth came over this morning for coffee. She invited me to her place for dinner. This is your idea of slow? I'm old. I can't afford your idea of slow. He grinned. Now, go on and give that man of yours his perfect Christmas. She was fairly certain she didn't have a man, and pretty certain the man she didn't have would have a better Christmas without her since she'd rejected him by walking away. You're sure you're okay? Joy wasn't sure she was going to be. Yep. Now, let's have that hug you drove all the way over to give me. You don't look like Santa, Cindy said as she and Nick climbed the stairs to Joy's third-floor apartment on Christmas Eve 2 hours after Joy had walked away. Santa has a big belly and he travels through chimneys. We have no reindeer to get to the roof. Nick tugged at a thin nylon cuff. The Santa suit they'd bought itched. But Nick was going all out to prove to Joy he loved her. Darn. She huffed. Can you tap your heels together 3 times? That's what Dorothy does in The Wizard of Oz. They'd watched it yesterday with Joy while they decorated the tree. Magic lamp? Aladdin. Sugar plum fairy wand? She grinned. Left it at home. They'd reached Joy's landing and stood outside her door. Is it okay to knock or do you have any other suggestions? She nodded, sending her curls bouncing. Knock. Nick lifted his hand. Wait. Cindy jumped up and grabbed his thin red sleeve. You have to say it first. What? She rolled those big eyes and whispered, ho ho ho. Right. He hefted his toy sack and put his heart into it. Joy deserved the very best. She wanted someone who could do Christmas right. She was going to get the very best of him and his Santa suit. Ho ho ho. Nothing. He and Cindy exchanged glances. She knocked and whispered, do it again. Ho ho ho. This time, they heard footsteps. The door swung open. Joy stood there in baggy sweats and her winter is coming t-shirt. She looked as if she might have been crying. Ho ho ho. I won't hold that shirt against you. He and Cindy pushed past her, eyes immediately drawn to a pink ruffled dress hanging from the curtain rod. What? No tree? No stocking over the fireplace? He'd figured as much. Nick slung his bag to the floor. Santa heard you were boycotting Christmas. That's unacceptable. Every house needs a tree. Cindy dug in the bag for a miniature Christmas tree, complete with miniature ornaments. She handed it to Joy. Thank you. Joy's eyes were misty. Ho ho ho. You've got no stocking hung. Nick reached into the bag for an embroidered stocking he and Cindy had filled with chocolate, perfume, and a pair of snowman earrings. Thank you. She brushed a hand over the embroidery, and then put the stocking on the coffee table near a cold bowl of ramen noodles. Ho ho ho. Come sit in Santa's lap and tell me what you want for Christmas. He sat in a chair by the empty fireplace. Santa is a bit of a perv, Joy said, her smile becoming more encouraging. He patted his thigh, keeping his other hand hidden. Go on, Cindy urged. It's Santa. Joy sat on Nick's lap. He pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her. Cindy sat on the floor at their feet. This is the best part. Ho ho ho. Tell me what you want for Christmas this year. You've been extra nice. No matter how much Nick had wanted to be a little naughty with her. This is pretty good. She stroked his fake whiskers. No one's ever done this for me before. It could be better. Nick showed her a red velvet box. You could be a permanent resident at the North Pole. Joy took the box with hands that trembled. She opened the lid and immediately closed it again. It's a ring. I hear there's an opening at the wedding chapel on New Year's Day. He added another ho 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 for effect. But, so soon? Are you sure? I love you, Joy Encastle. He tugged his beard beneath his chin and dropped the Santa voice. I've loved you since you gave away your Christmas stocking 20 years ago. I don't need you to help me create a perfect Christmas. As long as I've got you, every day is perfect. There were tears in her eyes as she kissed him. And laughter later as they rushed back to Nick's house to save the turkey from becoming turkey jerky. But mostly what Nick saw in her face and heard in her words was love. Dang if his fairy godmother wasn't right, after all.